Rise, renew, reconnect. Welcome to From the Ashes, a podcast where every story ignites hope and healing.
Shine the fire in the darkest night. The phoenix burns. It's ready for flight. Shadows may come, try to tear you apart, but you're the flame that ignites.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to From the Ashes. I am your host, Valerie Beck, and today my guest is Shiemier Munroe. She is a native from West LA, and she is the host of the podcast Lounge with Munroe. She has a passion for empowering everyone to heal their inner child and balance their mental health. And she is a youth educator for LA County. She is a very kind-spirited, very relatable person, and I'm really happy to have you here on the show, Shiemier. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, Valerie. I appreciate you. And it's an honor to be on your show. Especially, it's so fitting. Rising from the ashes is so fitting. As I mentioned to you, I resonate with the phoenix bird, and I have that tattooed on my left shoulder.
Absolutely. And it's something that I hopefully one day will also have tattooed on me. But yeah, Phoenix rising from the ashes has been a theme in my life, but I think even more so in the recent years because I've had to reinvent myself in so many different ways and just start over again and again, which is why I have this podcast, because I think it's not uncommon for us to have to go through this, especially if we choose to follow our heart and to be authentic to ourselves. So I always have people start with them telling a from the ashes story, a point in your life where you really have had to evaluate, the direction that you're going, where you've really had to pick up the pieces. So I will let you have the floor.
Okay. Well, where I picked up where I came from the ashes, so to speak, it actually started from college, in my master's program. And I'm going to start there and then go backwards, right? So That was a starting point for me, is one of my professors brought it to my attention that she noticed, that I wasn't participating. I mean, I was there in class, but that anytime she called on to me, that I told her, can you come back to me? And then in that moment, I would get up and step out of class. And that's happened quite often. And she picked up on that. I'm sure everybody else did in my class, which was embarrassing. Long story short, she pulled me to the side after class one day and said, hey, she goes, has anyone ever mentioned to you or maybe you even know that you may have symptoms of, ADHD or anxiety? And at first I took it kind of personal. And I'm like, no, I was like, I don't have that. And mind you, she's a psychiatrist. Okay. So she's seeing these things because during lectures, I would stand up against the wall because I just couldn't be in my seat. And that's been in my life throughout my childhood, is I can't be in my seat for too long. I want to do something else. I want to help. I was always that kid to ask the teacher, can I pass out the paper? Or, I want to do something. So I was always finished before everybody else. So anyways, I was reflecting after I was in denial. I'm like, no, everything's good. But she said, I really would like for you to highly consider, being evaluated as you're in this program, in psychology program. All of us, she says, every one of us has to be evaluated. And because in order to help others, we have to help ourselves first.
Yeah.
And so I took that in. And it did, to be transparent, it did bother me a lot because I thought I was being singled out, and especially being one of the, I was the only, brown skinned person in the class. I'm going to say about two of us in the class. I was at Pepperdine University, and I just felt like I was singled out. But it was not just her. Another professor also pulled me to the side and that was it. I'm like, okay, if is more than one professor saying that to me, and I had to take this serious because this is a master's program, right? and I'm studying psychology. I want to help people. I had understood that I have to help myself. And so I finally went to get evaluated. I was referred to from my university, referred to another, psychology department. Or sorry, yeah, I was getting evaluated. And sure enough, so I was diagnosed in 2015. I was diagnosed with ADHD, severe anxiety, mild depression, and I was able to be functional. I'm functional, but it was all a mask. I've been doing a lot of masking. And in order to heal that, or to come to terms with that, you have to, I guess, peel all those layers, so to speak, of your inner child. And that's when that was introduced to me, is starting from childhood. Because when I was diagnosed, it made sense. It made sense to me, everything I've been through, like just the feelings, everything, the anxiety during class time. It just made sense. For example, raising your hand, I'm so confident, and, kids around you make fun of you and call you a nerd or a geek. Like, oh, look at you, you think you know it all. It was because when I'm focused on something, or if I really like the topic, I'm gonna like raise my hand and talk about it, get excited about it. But as a young child, being made fun of because I knew something, kids would say like, "Oh, you read that? Like what?" Like, and so it just made me kind of like lower myself, or kind of just hide in my own shell, because I don't want to be labeled as a know-it-all, or a geek, or a nerd, which I now proudly, as an adult, I'm proud to be a nerd. I'm proud to, be, super focused on a certain topic.
Yeah.
So that's just something, it made me appreciate how I was back then. But in that moment, I wasn't, it was scary to fully be myself as a kid, with ADHD, because I was also, a weird kid, awkward. I would laugh at certain things that wasn't funny to others, or if it was funny, I was still laughing at it. And others were like, okay, that's not funny anymore. Or, just things that I always brought up. I ponder on things a lot that most kids wouldn't ponder on. And so, that was also indicator of one of the symptoms as a kid.
Okay. So it started all out with your kind of realizing that you have ADHD in your master's program. Did that send you on a healing journey? What happened afterwards that has changed your life? Like, what did that diagnosis open up for you?
Absolutely. It definitely started a whole healing journey of myself, of things that I've encountered throughout my journey, with being not just only with ADHD, but also being biracial. I'm half Mexican, half Jamaican, and I grew up sheltered, and not so much street smart. So because, with that being said, people take advantage, and they would see that I'm too nice. Right? So with that being said, like, yeah, I definitely healing the parts of me that I was, because I used to be a very timid person, and I wanted to, well, I have looked at those things that were not necessarily, I don't want to say the word weak, but it wasn't the best part of me, because I just didn't speak up for myself. And I wanted to, build on the strength of to speak up for myself and advocate. And that's where I've been working on myself. This has been since 2015. So I'm looking at just childhood traumas, things that I've endured, which I'm going to go into detail in my podcast. but episode 2, it won't go in detail. But things I've endured was, sexual assault, bullying. I was bullied a lot. That was throughout from elementary school to high school. That was very traumatic. I was scared to go to school. And to be honest, that was a cause of me not graduating from high school. And that's something nobody knows is I had to get my high school diploma from the office. I didn't get to walk on stage. So that is the reason why I pushed myself to finish college, to get my master's, because I was doing that for myself. I wasn't doing it to prove to nobody, but it was for myself that I can do it. And also to show my nieces and nephew that they too can do it and not let nothing limit them, despite of anything that comes their way in their journey.
Thank you for openly sharing your experiences with the trauma and the bullying. And I know it's not easy. If you don't mind, if I could ask just some of the aftermath or the consequences of that, I think it's important for people to hear like what the impact is of bullying, especially people don't realize that, because there's always that saying, right? Like, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. But it's so wrong. It's just it's so inaccurate.
Very inaccurate. It's funny, and I'm glad you brought that up because my poor dad, I mean, he did the best he could, but he would tell me to say that to the kids. Like when I would come home crying, that was the one thing, the quote that you just said right now. He goes, well, just tell them that sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. But that's not really, that's not going to protect you from the bullies, right? That actually is going to, it's like adding more to their fuel to make fun of you. But to answer your question, you said, what was the aftermath?
Yeah, what was the impact of that? Because what I would imagine is that some of what happened to you was internalized as it being your fault. A lot of the times when things happen to us in childhood, we don't know better, right? And so it takes a long time for us to realize like that wasn't us doing anything wrong. So I just want to hear a little bit about your experience with what your thought process was, like what impact did it have on you and your way of thinking about yourself?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you 100%. Yeah, during that time, I actually did blame myself for being just too nice, because that was the theme of my bullies is I was Miss Goody Two Shoes, or teacher's pet, or like you think you're all that. So things like that. What I internalize is that I'm not cool. Like I'm not a cool person, which kind of just made me more go into my shell. Like it really caused me to be more like a quiet person and not speak up at all. Like I was, even at such a young age, had to go see the school psychologist or the social worker because of other things that were happening at home, that like that was just another layer. Like things were happening at home, and then bullying happened at school. It just caused me to be more like kind of like a turtle in its shell, basically, not really wanting to be social. So yeah, I would hang out in the bathroom in junior high. Specifically, that was the harshest bullying I had, was in junior high. And yeah, I was very introverted, to say the least.
At what point in your life would you say that you realized it wasn't your fault?
So it's going back to the college.
Okay.
Yes, when I was diagnosed with ADHD and just sitting there on my therapist's couch, peeling away the layers. And yeah, I had a breakthrough that I was just being myself. I guess back in that time, just people being ignorant or, not educated, but children just, I guess when children see something different is when they pick at it, right? Like, and it's amazing because in today's world, being different is embraced. But back then in the 80s, 80s and 90s, it was so tough. And what was uncovered is is that during one of my therapy sessions is that I was just being myself, and it wasn't my fault. None of that. It was just they didn't understand. Maybe they wanted to be or not be, but maybe they didn't know how to embrace my difference or how I was with my personality. And yeah.
So oftentimes when we do go through a lot of our life, having a certain perception of ourselves, right? Of us being different or unworthy and whatnot, because we internalize it, it becomes a pattern in situations, even when we are not in a threatening situation, right? Maybe something new. And it becomes kind of our way to protect ourselves, right? Is to go back into that shell.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever noticed you going back into your shell in a situation where it was like, it wasn't really a threat, but like that was kind of like your automatic response?
Oh man. Yes. I must say in my dating life.
Okay.
Because, and then this is in general too, like when you meet somebody new, you want to like just give somebody just little parts of yourself because, and I think that's just in general, right? When you meet somebody,
Mhm.
you just kind of have to warm up first. But yeah, I have noticed myself that I do kind of like retreat, especially if I'm like making a goofy comment or if they don't get it, or like I don't, like they just make that comment, it makes me really wrinkle inside. Like I just,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, those moments. So yeah, that is true.
Mhm.
But I have to remind myself in those moments and also speak to myself like, it's okay. Like you're not for everybody. All I can do is be myself. They don't like it, or there's other people that embrace me and enjoy my silliness or my goofy comments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned before, like before you were made fun of for kind of being the person who's like gets hyper excited about something that interests you. And like now you would fully embrace that. What parts of you have you fully embraced? Like, have you been like, oh, before I like pushed that away, but now this is me.
Yeah. One, I'm a gamer. I love video games. And also I like people watching. And it's funny, I reconnected with my old friend, my preschool friend. Her and I, we used to people watch even as little kids, and we would put voices to people.
Mhm.
And so that's how we entertain ourselves in the schoolyard is like we would, I say it, basically do voiceovers.
Yeah.
And I was telling her like we should have just got into that career in doing a voiceover for cartoons because we'll make different voices for people like, and these people had no idea like what we were doing, but it was funny with how they were walking or doing something. And so those are little quirks that we did. I just know that that stayed with me. So I always have little funny stuff.
Uh-huh.
And now I see it on social media now. Like I think some people do it with animals, right? Like
Yeah.
yeah. So that's the type of thing that I'm into. I know that may be weird for somebody, but I just I like to do little voices and stuff for both animals and people.
Yeah. I mean, these days weird can it's like embrace. And I love that. Right. And I think the world is changing a lot because we're just exposed to so much more too.
Hmm.
Things that have been foreign for so long, like foreign cultures and languages, and then just like different ways of thinking of things. Now, like everyone is on social media talking about it. We have very little choice but to start to open our minds. Yeah.
Exactly. And that part, now that I think like you were saying, now that everything's on social media, there seems like to be this big embrace kind of, like that's accepted. People want to learn new cultures or want to learn that new dance or, like things like that. And even the fact that even nail polish, like, there's girls can wear like different nail polish colors on their fingers without being made fun of. Like,
Mm.
that's awesome how far we've come. had I done that as a kid, people be like, what? Like, why'd you color your nails like that? You know, like
Yeah.
just little things like that is, I just applaud how far we've come as a people, as humans, but we still have a lot to get over, with politics and racism still very, very much still alive these days. But overall, with embracing cultures, we're getting there.
We're definitely getting there.
Yeah.
I think it will be, yeah, you're right in that there's definitely a lot farther to go.
Yeah.
I guess it's just that people still have trouble empathizing.
Yeah.
And even when it's all over the internet, you have people like commenting like as if people didn't have feelings.
Yeah.
So it will be a really interesting next 10 or so years as technology is just like, phew, right? So it's just developing so fast and the connection between people is just like closing. It will be eye-opening to see how we evolve as a species.
Right.
Yeah.
And you just spoke about something, you just brought up something really interesting, because that's a very thing that keeps me from doing my podcast number 2 is the trolls, like
Mhm.
that is so scary, and it does bring back memories of being bullied, right? Like that's something that I'm noticing that I have to still kind of work through, but I know that I can do it.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, that's the scary part, is putting yourself out there and someone speaking negatively about it.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think it's such a valid fear and these people just do exist. And the ugly part about it is that it's such a wide world out there. We don't know if this individual is just like really malicious. We don't know if there's like an organization behind. Like there's just
Mhm.
so much out there. And a lot of times it's just people who are lonely, but
Mhm.
it can seem very threatening, right? Especially when it's like outright malicious and like ill will
Yeah.
like forced upon you.
Yeah.
Yeah. How how have you seen yourself building up your resilience ever since like you realized like I really want my story told? How have you been have building up that resilience again?
Yeah. Me hearing other people's stories has actually inspired me to even tell my story as well, because I know how it feels to feel alone, right? And when you hear someone sharing themselves, their own hardships and their own personal stuff, I that resonated with me, and that's helped me in my journey. And so therefore it's almost like I want to give back, to community, or even worldwide, like anyone that's going through or has gone through the same things that I've gone through. I want to let the world know that they're not alone. Like even if it reaches one person, the struggles with being diagnosed with ADHD. I feel like it's so important to, because I know there's people that don't believe in therapy, but I really highly encourage it. I can't emphasize it enough, because I myself, I didn't for a while, but then I get it. To be diagnosed, especially if you know the symptoms you're having, it's so much helpful, and it's an eye opener to yourself, right? Because now you know how to manage these certain things and to be more, effective, especially when it comes to school and work. You need those tools, fidget toys, for example,
Mhm.
those noise cancellation earphones that you need so you can focus on a paper or something like that. That extra time you need for an exam that others don't get. Those little pieces are so helpful to get through certain tasks. And to have that, had I not listened to my professor, or I don't know where I would be right now. Without those tools, and just with anything, having that therapist to, like, so to speak, like hold a mirror, not to literally hold a mirror, but they're reflecting things to you on how, when you're sharing, and it makes you like pause and think and reflect, like, wow, I didn't know that, or I didn't think about that before. So it's so important to go through that process to become a better person for yourself, and because you're doing it for you,
Yeah.
tapping into your higher self I think is very important. And you're also healing your inner child, your inner teenager at the same time, resolving things that the whole point of healing the inner child is that your voice wasn't heard and you weren't seen.
Mm-hmm.
And so as an adult, you're being like that, you're a lawyer, basically, like you're advocating for that little child in you, and let it be seen and heard. And that's where we're at now. As an adult, you're basically being that representative and doing the things that you couldn't do back then. So that's why I want to, being that voice that others are scared of. But I want to empower everyone that they too have a story and they can share it when they're ready, because it's almost like a healing in itself when you're sharing, and then you're, how do I say, it's cathartic, right? Like to do that, because at the same time you're like, wow, you're just healing yourself as you're going through that process.
You said a lot of things that were really important, and I have so many questions, but I think one that is popping up right now, or a comment rather, is this being an advocate for your inner child. One of the most powerful meditations I've ever done was an inner child healing meditation.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't even expecting it. So I want to also talk about being biracial, living as a third culture kid, because I am a first generation American born Chinese. And I do come from a family where there's been generational trauma. I don't think that my childhood per se was traumatic, but I carry the after effects of my grandparents' generations and my parents' generations, because the way that they were raised and treated carries over eventually to me, right?
Right.
And it was really interesting to go through and do the inner child work, because I realized that that little Valerie really didn't feel like she had a voice.
Mm-hmm.
I remember journaling throughout my childhood as a kid. I would have dreams about that very thing, like feeling powerless, like feeling like, my dad listened to me and whatnot. And it didn't really have anything to do with my parents per se, but like there was something about just the way that I grew up where like I just felt so small, and it carried over to adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear your thoughts on that, and then I want to talk a little bit about like what it was like to grow up with two, I guess, immigrant parents, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In America. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that what you said, resonated with me, of, like you said, your little Valerie, and then me, little Shiemier, because I was, that when parents say, oh, you're just a kid, basically when someone says that, it has such a negative undertone to it, that our words or voice doesn't matter when we're trying to speak, or right, or the common thing I would be told, because I'm the oldest of my siblings, but like, this is an adult conversation, go play, go do something. But I would overhear conversations or drama or things happening in the family that I wanted to voice. I wanted to say something about it, but just never, I was not acknowledged. And so that also affected me, right? It does. Those little things are things that kids won't forget, moments like that. And it does do something to their growth as they're, and I think I mentioned this to you before our podcast about the Eric Erickson theory,
Yeah.
ages and stages. So whatever age you're at where you experience trauma or something, you're going to get stuck at that age until that gets resolved. And that's where the inner child comes in. The inner child healing comes in, whatever age you're at, it's going to be in you. And that's where, if you ever get being told, oh, you're such a big kid, or it's because, I mean, yeah, you're an adult, but also, I don't know if I'm explaining this right, but you're part of you, you know, your inner you, that
Oh,
little kid in
absolutely.
you is in you, because that's at the age where you need to make peace with, you know. I mean, I don't know if that's the right thing to say, but
Yeah.
yeah, going back to, not to stray too much away.
No, it's a really good point though. Yeah.
So yeah, growing up, my mom is from Mexico, Guadalajara, Mexico, and then my dad's from Kingston, Jamaica. So those two, just me saying that is, those are two different worlds. Okay, it's the food. I mean, I gotta say the food is bomb. I had the privilege of having the best of both worlds with the food and the culture, you know, music. But there was so much pressure because my parents came here from their country and they wanted a better life. So I felt like they were living vicariously through me, like all that pressure of, you know, doing my best and focus on school, you know, just immense pressure. And that's why, like, it did affect me when I wasn't able to walk on stage, because, you know, I would have been the first in my family to finish school, finish high school. And I didn't. And I feel like I was a big letdown, which is part of the reason why I'm like, I have to go to college. I gotta do this. It's not for them, but for me more so. I want to show myself that not to give up, you know, to keep going, moving forward, despite of, you know, the hurdles and challenges that have been thrown my way. But yeah, just the pressures of doing the best I can. Also, the role of being second mom. I didn't get too much to have a full teenage life or child life because I had to watch my siblings, you know, while my parents are at work. So yeah, things like that, and having resentment because of that, because I didn't get to do the things I wanted to really do. I had to stay home and, you know, wash dishes, or, you know, just like I said, be like a second mom. So yeah, it was rough. And also because my parents they didn't understand the culture, you know, American culture, and, you know, me wanting certain things, and there was like this disconnect of, you know, the American culture. I don't know, they just,
Yeah.
especially from my mom's, and yeah.
I can definitely relate to that. I actually want to go back a little bit to what you said before about the part of us that is still a kid.
Mhm.
It's a really powerful point because we will have emotional meltdowns and it will seem like all of a sudden it's like we don't know how to act anymore. Like we don't know how to adult.
Mhm.
And it could be just so fast, right? It's just a trigger.
Yep.
It is a trigger. I mean, I don't even know if I'm over it yet. I at this age where if I get triggered by something, you will see me start to bawl and like act out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that is the inner child that wasn't seen or heard,
Yeah.
right? It is the
Yep.
inner child that felt like crying was the only way for us to get any kind of empathy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially when you feel misunderstood, right? Like,
Mhm.
for me, my triggers when I'm not understood and things get taken out of context, that you'll see tears coming out of my eyes, and it's I just out of frustration. It's so true. And even in that moment, those are moments that even as a kid, I would get in trouble for
Mhm.
just things, and wasn't allowed to explain what happened, and yet I get spanked, or without even no explanation, or be punished
Mhm.
without hearing my side of the story. That was always the case, you know, when it came to, I don't know, if I just things, you know, like I get in trouble or I'm coming home late or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can get like, at least I know for me, it has gotten sometimes to the point where it feels very self-punishing.
Mm.
And like I have to really pull myself back because sometimes it is like I am choosing to self-punish so that like it's like you can't harm me more than I can harm myself, almost has been the reaction I've had sometimes. And I know how problematic that can be because like at the end of the day, you really have to be your own self-advocate. And if you can't, like no one really is there to save you from that.
Oh yeah. And that's where you feel the loneliest, right? I
Uh-huh.
mean, I can speak for myself, like when being that advocate, but also at the same time you feel so alone in that moment where but you have to have that strength, build that enough strength to pull yourself from that, like I like what you said earlier about no one can harm you other than yourself, right? Like, because I know we tend to, well, I tend to be hard on myself. I'm
Mhm.
not sure. I mean, are you hard on yourself in those moments?
Yes. I certainly feel like in those moments, I feel very desperate in those moments.
And tell me more about that. Like, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I'm at answering that.
When I feel like I'm not being heard, the child within me just wants to cry harder, wants to lash out harder because it's like, why isn't this being understood? How can I get myself to be heard more? And then it just becomes like emotional spiral. When it becomes emotional spiral, it's like it's very hard to escape that
Hmm.
rationally.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I hear you.
Hmm.
No, yeah, definitely. Especially the spiraling part. Uh, I've done that with my my therapist. And yeah, it is. And I love that I was given that space to spiral.
Hmm.
Um, but it's about how to, once that happens, on how to reflect on it and just give yourself that grace and to give yourself that love. And I think that's the part that is not taught to us also as kids, is to give ourselves that self-care, that self-love, that space. I think so much when something happens, it's like almost like parents, they act like nothing happened, or
Hmm.
things get brushed under the rug. And so I think growing up seeing that, I mean, for myself, I don't give myself that. Like I just, act like nothing happened, but it did. And it's okay to sit there and cry, or, and be mad for that moment. It's okay. And to give ourselves that hug,
Hmm.
I know it may sound strange, to others, but we know we are a being. We're human, and we deserve that. Yeah. So it's just all about pouring that into ourselves, because we have to imagine that our inner child is right in front of us.
Hmm.
So what would we tell a child? What are we going to say? Those are things to keep that in mind, and say that. I remember my therapist, I have it in my refrigerator door right now, a picture of myself, my 6-year-old self. She says to look at it and speak to it, because that's who's inside you.
Hmm.
So I always, look at it, and I'm always reflective, and speak nothing but affirmations to my 6-year-old self.
It is really powerful. Thank you for guiding me through that conversation. Like I don't often reflect on that, but it is such a big part of it. And it is very scary to go down that route sometimes, but it's necessary just because some of the times where we have been kids are the times where we have had the least power. It just is that way.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's unfortunate. But I think in this day and age, I love that more and more, families are having those conversations with their children and giving children the voice, to say, or to partake in family decisions and things like that. I think that's so empowering and important. So to make a child feel that they too are a member, like their voice is heard. And yeah, I hope, like you said, we have so much, like we're there, but then it's like there's so much to get to, right?
Yeah.
In this human experience, so to speak.
Let's bring it back to the present. Now that I know that you're a health educator and so you do actually teach kids now and you're doing your podcast where you're going to be telling your story. When you're teaching kids, or if you're just around with anyone who may need help with this work, like what are some tools that you give them?
Oh, I definitely give them the space to express themselves, you know, in the work that I do, or even, you know, if my niece, even in my own family, they want to talk to me. I give them the space to share with me whatever they're comfortable with. And I always tell them that what you share with me stays between us, unless you plan to hurt yourself or hurt others, you may have to reach out to, other resources. But I'm giving them that space, and also not forcing them to say anything. Even though if I ask questions, I respect, what they share. But I always want to what I leave with them is that they are not alone, and that even though if they maybe they don't want to talk to me about whatever it is, that there's other people. There's so much resources out there, but I always comfort them and let them know that nothing that they say or do is silly. We've all have been there where they've been, and they're not alone. That's the key thing, is, and that we will get through this together, in whatever they're dealing with.
Yeah. Beautiful. So tell us a little bit about Lounge with Munroe, how you got the idea to do it, and where you would like to take it.
Oh, thank you for that question. Yeah, Lounge with Munroe. I came up with that because ideally I do want to open up a lounge. It's going to be a space where, people come and listen to music, get some tea, possibly some like natural juices if I collaborate with my dad. And it's a safe space for them, for somebody to come in, either listen to someone, if I bring in a guest speaker for the day, to come educate, the community about something, or in another day have poetry night, open mic, and then karaoke night. So it's basically like, I don't want to call it a club, but just a lounge where arts is celebrated, like different healing arts are celebrated, and people can just come and heal parts of themselves, right? And that's why I'm so intentional on the tea, like having tea and just things that are going to help with health. I don't want to bring in alcohol into the into the mix, even though, yes, sometimes that's helpful too. So I want to do that. But so Lounge with Munroe. Munroe is my last name, and I feel like that was easier for people to pronounce, because I don't want to say Lounge with Shiemier. It was hard, whatever, to come up with the name. But
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, Munroe's easy, and then if I want to leave, I guess, my family's legacy, like the name, and that's why, in case that I were to no longer be here or pass, that somebody like a niece, nephew, or someone in the family can like take over, or
Yeah.
So that's why I left the name there. So I'm starting with the podcast first to build the community and the listeners, and then hopefully bring them into the lounge when I physically open it. But the podcast is just going to be something where, like how you and I are having this conversation, I want to open up the those conversations as I share my story, and then bring in people, not just anybody, but people that I've come across in my path. I see myself as like Dorothy from Wizard of Oz. And that's how I see myself in this world, is the people, like how, just like how Dorothy ran into the lion and the Tin Man. We all have come across various peoples in our journey, right? And they come along with us in this journey. Some may not, some people cannot come on this journey, unfortunately, but they helped us along the way, right? They helped us to get to the Oz, so to speak, But I want to bring in the people that's helped me to be who I am, and interview these people, whether they're friends, family, or people I just met, like yourself, that are helped me to empower myself. And so I want to celebrate everyone. I want to celebrate and let their story be heard, just like how you're doing on your podcast, which I find amazing. And man, God makes no mistakes. So it's so crazy how you and I were sitting right next to each other at the speaker event. That's how we met. And the fact that when you mentioned your podcast, the name of it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was blown away. Like, what? She's doing exactly what I want to do, and I admire you a lot. And I really admire what you're doing, and I know I see this going very far. All I can do is just tell you, keep rising and shining. Like a phoenix. Like, just keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Shiemier. That means a lot to me. And I'm really happy to have had you on the podcast today. It's turned out to be a really good conversation, really deep. So I wish you all the best as well. Thank you so much for being here today.
No, thank you, Valerie. Appreciate you. And you are going to be on my podcast too. So just wait and see.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everyone. Hey there. If you've been tuning in and finding value in our discussions about resilience and personal growth, I think you'll really appreciate what we're building at Club Phoenix. Club Phoenix is more than just a community. It's a movement towards holistic wellness and vibrant living. Whether you're battling burnout or just seeking a deeper connection with your mental and physical health, Club Phoenix offers tools, resources, and a supportive community to help you rise above and thrive. Dive deeper into your journey of transformation by visiting us at intrepidwellness.life/Club Phoenix. Discover how you can join our community and start shaping a life filled with vitality and purpose. That's intrepidwellness.life/Club Phoenix. Can't wait to see you there, rising together.